Right, and Peter, when we look at the broad relationship, the view from Moscow, of course, is very different. Vladimir Putin has said that he doesn't think that these deteriorating relations is solely because of Syria. In fact, he told the Russian state-owned media outlet RT that, do you think our relations with the United States changed because of Syria? No, not because of Syria, but because of the attempts by one side to impose its decisions on the entire world. So to what extent is the U.S. to blame for this?
Well, I would place a lot of the blame on the United States. I think the Americans hold most of the cards. And I think you really have to put it in a context. We can go back very far, but I at least trace it back to post-1990, the agreement that was made about the expansion of NATO. Gorbachev says that they promised him that NATO would not expand one thumb's width to the east. And what has happened since then? NATO has incorporated 12 countries. It's gone up to Russia's border. And even in 2008, George Bush said that I got NATO to agree to expand to Ukraine and Georgia. This is a direct security threat to the Russians. So from the Russian standpoint, what they're doing is asserting their national security interests. The United States has a very different idea. If you look back in the 1990s, the United States was able to pretty much walk over Russia. Russia's economy collapsed. It shrunk to the size of the Netherlands during that time. Life expectancy dropped 9 years during that period. The 90s was a terrible period, but with Yeltsin in power, the United States was able to get pretty much anything they wanted from Russia. When Putin took over, he wanted to collaborate with the United States, but he wasn't going to roll over in the same way that Yeltsin had. And so he's asserting Russia's national security interests, which go against America's perceived national security interests. I don't see a real conflict, but if the United States wants to maintain global hegemony in the way that it has, then there is going to be that kind of conflict now.
Lawrence Scott, what do you make of that? The fact that did the United States break a promise when it expanded eastwards, when NATO expanded eastwards, and is Putin now just reasserting Russia's security interests?
Well, there's no doubt about it, and I agree with Peter that particularly when Bush said, we're going to go to Georgia and Ukraine, that was a step too far. I testified against NATO expansion in the 90s. I debated Bob Zoellick, who went to work for the second President Bush as trade representative, and then was head of the World Bank. That was. But even having said that, I think it's important to keep in mind when you're talking about Syria, I think what President Putin is trying to do is to divert the attention of the Russian people from the real problems they have at home by trying to play this increased role in the world. And I would suggest that he go back and take a look at what happened to the Soviet Union when they went into Afghanistan. He can prevent Assad from losing, but he can't make them win. And they're spending money that they don't have. The United States has stayed out of the Civil War. We focused on ISIS. We have not gotten involved. And if he doesn't focus on ISIS, that's going to come back and hurt him. Because remember, when Putin came into power, he put down the rebellion in Chechnya. And you have a lot of people from Chechnya coming to join ISIS. And at some point, they're going to go back home if we allow ISIS to continue. Remember, it was a Chechnyan who was there with the Istanbul, bombing. So regardless of, what he brought to office, I think the fact of the matter. And then finally, because of what he's doing in Syria, the European Union has kept the sanctions on him that they put on when he took over Crimea. And by the way, that violated an agreement that the Russians made in 1994 that if Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, that they would, not go back in and allow their territory to remain whole. So they were wavering on him because those sanctions impact them much more than us. But once he went into Syria and did this horrible things, bombing humanitarian convoys and stuff, they put the sanctions back on. In the long term, that's going to hurt him.
Okay, I want to get back